Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Anthony, and I'm a sales engineer at Sonoma Partners. Today, we're bringing you this short video to talk a little bit about how a consulting firm might be using Dynamics 365 today. This video is going to be part of a two-part series, the second video being a little bit longer version in which we go into some more specific features. To start off today, we want to talk a little bit about Dynamics 365 and how it really provides a way to get the full view of a client relationship all in one place. Because as we know now, especially in the consulting space, it's really living in the heads, the inboxes, and the Excel spreadsheets of those within the firm. But within Dynamics 365, you can truly bring all that into one place and act on it to build and maintain those client relationships much more effectively. Now, it's no secret that a majority, if not all of the relationship building that we're doing in the consulting space is either on the road or face to face with our clients and key contacts. So it makes sense that we start the presentation today via our Dynamics mobile application. As you're seeing it here is on the iPad, but this is the same app that you would get across all smartphones and tablets. You can see that I'm logged in as Bryson, a partner who works with Johnson & Johnson, and in particular our key contact in Mark Dayton. The use case here is let's assume Bryson is in a cab ride on the way to go meet with Johnson & Johnson and Mark, and he has 10 minutes to basically understand everything he can about the client, the opportunity that they're working on, and maybe some personal details about Mark. But first and foremost, when Bryson opens up the app, the first thing he sees is this concept of a today view. And on this today view here, you see quite a few things. On the left-hand side, some action cards telling Bryson, based on the information that sits within Dynamics and Exchange for things like Outlook, these are the things that I should be approaching as I'm going into my workday. On the bottom, we have some quick create activities, creating new records, new notes, and even going through some task flows as well. On the right-hand side, I have a list of my favorite records. As I mentioned, as Bryson, I work with Johnson & Johnson. I have one of my key contacts in Mark Dayton, so those are listed as favorites, as well as some recently viewed records down below. But as I mentioned, I've got 10 minutes to understand everything I can about the client, the opportunity, and the contact. So we'll start off on the client record for Johnson & Johnson. And in here, we get some pretty relevant information for the consulting space. A scorecard in the top left asking things like how many referrals have we gotten from Johnson & Johnson? When was the last touch point that we've had with them? In the summary area, looking at things like who is our primary partner, the client health? What is our actual firm profit for this client in particular? We have a list of our open activities so I know who is doing what and when they're scheduled to do so. A couple of notes that we're listing here that include attachments. OneNote notebooks to collaborate on behalf of this client. And then looking more specifically at a list of our contacts at Johnson & Johnson, recent opportunities we're working on with them, as well as some things like what are our current practices that we're currently offering to this client, and alternatively, what could be some client needs that they might have. You also see that I have a list of all of my internal team members that are associated with Johnson & Johnson and the role that they play as we're going to grow this business. Next, I want to look at our contact in Mark Dayton. As I mentioned, we probably want to see some personal details about him. So going back to the front of the screen here, I'm going to click on Mark Dayton on the left-hand side. And in here, you see again some more specific information. Now that scorecard has changed to show things like when was the last time I contacted Mark? When is his birthday, his anniversary? In the summary area, things like his address and email address, phone number, and anywhere where you see these blue hyperlinks, as you'd imagine, you can click something like the email and it would open up your device's native mailing application to start composing an email out to Mark. As well, we still see things like open activities, some notes right here, again, including attachments. Looks like you just got a new dog and there's a quick picture. And then some more personal details about him. Things like who his wife's name is, newsletters that he's currently enrolled to get from our marketing team, and then some contact info, whether he is opting in or opting out any of our marketing campaigns or ways that we want to reach out to him. Now, the last thing that I want to take a look at is that opportunity. So I'm going to go back to our today view, and we have that Johnson & Johnson tax opportunity here. And in here, same format. So you can see that as we're going through, it's very easy to understand how to go from entity to entity because everything looks and feels and navigates the same. But now, as you can see, since we're sitting on an opportunity, my scorecard has changed to show things like the estimated close date, our estimated revenue, me as the primary partner, and the health of that opportunity. I also have a business process flow that sits across the top that gives me coaching and guidance as I'm going through the course of working on this opportunity so that I'm more likely than not going to be able to win this opportunity. Let's assume now that I'm back at my desk, I finished up that meeting with Johnson & Johnson, and I'm accessing that same client record via our web browser to truly get a 50,000 foot view of the client and where we stand as a consulting firm with Johnson & Johnson in particular. As you'll probably notice, everything that we're seeing here so far is pretty much the same that we saw on the iPad. So you can see that the experience is seamless across whatever device you're accessing or digesting this content from. On the left-hand side are summary information. We have marketing segmentation below that. Our activity feed that sits in the middle where we're looking at tasks that have been completed or scheduled, as well as that relationship assistant that's giving us those action cards, things that we need to work on throughout the course of our workday. On the right-hand side, again, similar to what we saw on the iPad, a list of our related contacts, related opportunities, and projects that we've worked on. Now, the difference in the web browser here is if I start to scroll down, you see that I am starting to get into some more specific information about the client. Using tools like we're seeing here, Customer Insights provided by Inside View. This is a tool that sits on this form that parses through thousands and thousands of different sources to give me as the partner an idea of what's new and exciting with Johnson & Johnson. Next time that I talk to Mark, maybe I know what they've been in the news for and I can bring that up so that he understands that I'm truly invested in them as a client. Scrolling down even further, we understand that relationships are probably the key component of being successful in the consulting space. So through here, we're doing things like tracking our relationships, as you can see on the left-hand side through this kind of spider web view or this map view, where we have Johnson & Johnson that sits in the center. And from Johnson & Johnson, we can see all the connections there. We can see Mark Dayton as a contact. We have Francisco as a contact. And you could even go further and further down the depth of that connection. So we know that we're working with Mark Dayton at Johnson & Johnson. We could also see through here that Mark has a couple of inroads with contacts at maybe other organizations so that we can utilize our relationship with Mark to make inroads with those other potential clients. On the right-hand side, looking at things like our email interactions, that's syncing all up with Exchange. We're looking at member firm scores. If you have different offices that are contributing to the success of Johnson & Johnson, you can see the role that they play here. Scrolling down even further, some things like white space reporting, again, some similar things that we saw on the mobile device. What are the current services we are offering to them? Alternatively, what are some of the unsold services? And on the right-hand side, even some graphical consumptions of things like the revenue by service line and the revenue by specialized services. Scrolling down and finishing up the form for the client here, we're looking at things like a strategic plan. So now we can track on behalf of Johnson & Johnson, what are our objectives over, let's say, the next 6 to 12 months? What are our relationship goals with our contacts? And then who is our team and allies? Who has a hand internally with Johnson & Johnson, and what role do they play? And on the right-hand side, some strategic plan tasks. So we know how to, again, approach what we're going into with growing our relationship with Johnson & Johnson. So at this point, we've consumed a lot of information. From our mobile device, we looked at Johnson & Johnson as a client. We looked at our contact in Mark Dayton, and we even looked at the state of the opportunity that we were working on with them. We then came over to our web browser in which we got even more in depth with things like strategic planning and white space reporting. At this point, it might make sense to start looking at our business as a whole at a larger level, a much broader level. And the best way to consume that data is by way of a dashboard. I'm going to access my personal dashboard by clicking on the company logo that sits in the top toolbar. And you'll notice, as I mentioned, I'm playing the role of Bryson, who's a partner at my firm. So the first dashboard that I land on is a partner daily dashboard, in which I'm seeing things that are relevant to me. I'm seeing my current sales pipeline by the stage of the opportunity that it's in. In the top right, I see trending documents internally. I see my team's new proposals, and I'm even seeing some things like stagnated opportunities in which we're using dynamics to tell us, hey, based on opportunities that you've opened up and started working on, it's been this number of days before you've had any activity on this opportunity. So now I know to go back and work on that part of the pipeline as I'm going through the course of my workday. Down below, I even have a chart and graphic that's coming in from Power BI, in which we're looking at top accounts by revenue. And by clicking on this chart down here, that'll open up the report that generated this graphic in the Power BI report that it came from. So that concludes our short consulting video. As I mentioned, in our next video, we're going to go more in depth with some features of things like the Dynamics 365 app for Outlook, project service automation, and things like creating a marketing list based on segmentation data. If you'd like to join, we look forward to seeing you in the next video. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out.